Hello good people of YouTube and welcome to my hobby channel. In this video I will be taking a look at a variety of different ogres. From some really early sculpts from a bygone era, through to some recently reissued models, and some Age of Sigmar ogres that I've been rebuilding and kitbashing into a restoration project of my old Ogre Kingdoms plastic army, to some classic models by other manufacturers, including these ogres that I sculpted myself for the Battleforge, to the latest offerings by Wargames Atlantic, and a quick look at some sci-fi ogres. So the first thing I wanted to do was take a look at some really early ogres, and in particular one of my favourite, which I think is a talisman ogre, and I've had this since I was a teenager. It's been painted and stripped a couple of times, and a couple of years ago I started going through my collection and trying to get all my old minis restored. That is awaiting a repaint. I've also got this ogre here, which I think is from a personality box set or something. I have a feeling it may be a box set that Brian Ansell put together if he didn't actually sculpt the figures himself. This particular one had a broken weapon, which I have fixed, and I'm trying to restore that to its former glory. Right, and I do actually have another broken version of this ogre here without the crest on the helmet and without the weapon. So what I'm thinking of doing is a bit of sculpting or converting on this model so that I can include him in my Empire or Bretonnian army. So a quick scale comparison there. You can see how small these old school ogres were. This one was probably from the mid 1980s, but I do think that with a little bit of converting, a little bit of tweaking, he could actually make quite a nice unit filler in either my Bretonnian or my Empire army. Next ogres I wanted to take a look at were this unit of Goldfag's ogres. Now I think these are the 2nd edition models. I've had these since I was a teenager, and I have actually got another unit, but it's missing Goldfag himself and the standard bearer. So I've got 4 troopers, the champion and the musician, but I'm missing these 2 in order to complete that unit. Now I might actually play a larger unit with an extra rank or some extra figures at the side. I haven't quite decided yet, but again I just wanted to have a quick look at these and do some scale comparisons with the old metals. Okay, so this is a regular trooper, Goldfag ogre trooper, and again he's old school from the mid 1980s, and I just wanted to do a quick scale comparison there with the plastic Empire or Bretonnian. Now my feeling with regards to the scale of this guy here is he might actually make quite a nice Chaos Marauder or something in terms of his size, rather than an ogre. But nevertheless, I guess if you wanted to run them as ogres, chaos ogres, you probably could do. That might work quite nicely. I'll be painting my original unit of Golgfag's ogres up to play 3rd edition Warhammer with, because I still enjoy that game. But I may take the 2nd unit, the 2nd incomplete unit that I've got, and see if I can paint those up to go with a chaos army that I have yet to unbox. Following on from that, I've got a few more ogres, and again in the middle is one of my favourite all-time models. I know this one is still quite popular on eBay, so it can fetch silly prices, but I've had this again since I was a teenager. It's been painted and stripped and painted several times, and now I've zenithal primed it ready for the restoration that I was doing on my my old collection. This is an ogre shaman. Now again, this is a model from the 1980s, along with this one here, which I have a feeling That might be the original Scrag the Slaughterer. I'll have to check all this. It's been a long time since I've poured through my early catalogues, Citadel catalogues. But anyway, so in the process of restoring these guys to see if I can make use of them in Warhammer Fantasy Battles 3rd edition or Warhammer the Old World. And just very quickly, I want to do a size comparison there of the Ogre Executioner against one of the 2nd edition Goldfag's Ogre Troopers. Whilst we're here, I'll bring out the champion. Now I do have another example of this model as well, like I said, from a 2nd unit of Ogres that's incomplete. Scale wise, they're, you know, pretty good, from the same era. Goldfag as well, he's a little bit bigger than the troopers are, so there could be some mileage using these guys, as I said, as some sort of chaos warrior or chaos ogre. Now again, if we do a quick scale comparison with this old metal figure compared to the plastics, I think his size is a bit more respectable, and he's definitely still very ogre-like. There's potential for including this one in an old world army. And here we have another edition of Goldfag's Ogres. These a bit later than the ones that I've shown you, and they kind of bring us into the Marauder Miniatures era. Now these I've acquired second-hand off a friend of mine who was a pretty accomplished painter, and all I'm doing at the moment is basically repositioning them on the 40mm bases that they came with. I won't be repainting these miniatures, but I will be adding glazes, washes and a few highlights to try and make them pop and try and make them work with my Warhammer the Old World armies. And here we have two troopers side by side for a scale comparison, and you can see how the previous edition here is a lot smaller height wise, and these ogres here are more in line with the Imperial Ogres that Marauder were producing at the time, and I'll compare those in a second. Again, looking at these with some Games Workshop plastics, they fit really well, and of course these could be taken as Badland Ogres or Ogre allies for any army that is allowed mercenaries in the Warhammer the Old World rules. Right, so here we have an Imperial Ogre that was originally a Marauder Ogre, and you can see that they're basically similar proportions. This is actually an original model that I've had for quite some time, but again it's being stripped and zenithal primed, ready to be painted, and this will be used in my Warhammer the Old World army along with this one as well. And these are the only two sort of examples that I have at the moment of those Marauder Imperial Ogres. And just in case a scale comparison is necessary, I'll bring in the plastics there so you can see this is what we are working with the Old World today. Just want to bring in the Ogre Executioner, because that is another model that is suitably scaled for Warhammer the Old World and would possibly work quite nicely as a Chaos Ogre. Now I also have a very large collection of Dragon Rune Ogres. I think I've got a unit of 12 of these guys. These have been out for quite some time, and actually they were around when I was sculpting my first giants and just getting into miniature sculpting. Now these are still available, I believe, from, I think it's Armorcast over in the States. They are quite pricey, but they are beautiful examples of some very rugged looking barbarian style ogres. Now as ogres go, these guys are very big and very chunky. I'll just do a quick comparison with the old Goldfag Ogre Troopers that I had as a teenager, and you can see the significant difference in size there, which makes me feel that these guys might perhaps make some good Chaos Marauders or something, but there's definitely been a lot of scale creep in the 20 odd years between these two models. So if I bring in the Ogre Executioner, again, he does look very small now in comparison, as you can see. Height wise, he's the same as the Trooper, but he doesn't have the bulk that these lovely Dragon Rune Ogres have. And then if we compare him to a Marauder Imperial Ogre, he is still a very intimidating sight. I think absolutely fantastic. Just compare these two, which are slightly smaller examples of each. Again, the Dragon Rune Ogres are hefty beasts, and I think they really would look good in a Chaos army or Orc and Goblin, which is why I've kept hold of mine. If we bring in the later edition of Goldfag that I've got, still the Dragon Rune Ogres are coming in as bigger and bulkier and much more intimidating. But I think that's fine, that's cool. I think they'll all work, painted up well. Just to compare him with an Empire Handgunner, as you can see, scale-wise, I think that is spot on. And again, that looks really good. I'm looking forward to getting these ogres painted and on my wargaming table. And as I may have said at the beginning of this video, I have actually got myself an Ogre Kingdoms army. I used to have a lovely army, and I ended up losing it during my divorce. So one of the things that I've been trying to do since Warhammer the Old World has happened is resurrect the Ogre Kingdoms army that I had. Most of the models are available at the moment as Ogres or Ogre Morbites or Ogre More Tribes, whatever, in Age of Sigmar. And I do actually have some models that I've yet to build from the Age of Sigmar range, which I am retrofitting onto square bases to use in Warhammer the Old World. And just do a quick scale comparison here against the Dragon Rune Ogres. The plastic ogres from Games Workshop do have a very distinct look about them, so there's quite a distinctive vibe to those models, which I like. But of course I also love the old school feel that some of these other ogres have. But this was a model that fortunately I didn't actually lose this one. He was in pieces and I've had to restore him and glue him back together, and I've no idea where that vulture came from either, but he uses bits and pieces from various kits. And I'll be using him as a character model in my Ogre Kingdoms army. And while I've got this chap out, I'll just bring in the Imperial Ogres that have recently been re-released for the Old World, so that you can see how they size up against the plastics. And the Ogre Executioner, although the style and the look and feel is quite different, size-wise I think they work. Just bring in an old Trooper, which is quite a bit smaller, and then a more up-to-date one, which again, scale-wise, slightly shorter, not so bulky, but I think would still work in a separate unit. For those of you who aren't familiar with these plastic ogres, as I said, they've been around for a while. That's one compared to a Bretonnian, and that is one compared to an Empire Handgunner. So they're imposing enough. Whether or not they would actually fit if you were wanting ogre allies in your Bretonnian or Empire armies, or ogre mercenaries, whether they fit, I don't know. But there we have it. And now we come to a more up-to-date offering, this time from Wargames Atlantic and their plastic Landsknecht or Landsknecht Ogres. These I've been building for a previous video, and I've gone to the trouble of magnetizing the heads and the arms so that I can swap all the variations around. Now I've built some with a very kind of Renaissance look and some that look more like conquistadors, and that's so that I can use them with an Empire army, or an Estalia, army, and as I said, I've featured all that in a previous video. I also intend to use these ogres with some historical miniatures for my, never mind the Billhooks Fantasia. Okay, if we start by looking at this one, as I said, I've magnetized the parts so that I can swap things around, heads and weapon arms and so on, but also I've made a similar one here where I've kit bashed some parts from the Ogre kingdoms, or the Ogre tribes boxes as they're now known. So I've lifted a pistol from there and also that blade to try and make them look more ogre ogre-like and less human. Now I wanted to compare these guys with the Marauder Ogres that were relaunched for Warhammer the Old World, and as you can see, scale wise and size wise they fit pretty well. In fact, I'd say the only thing that perhaps made them look a bit different was the fact that maybe these heads are sort of twice the size of the plastic heads. So if you're a confident converter and sculptor and you wanted to put a bigger head on the plastic Wargames Atlantic ogres, you could probably make a pretty seamless kit bash and conversion there to integrate with the metals. Just do a scale comparison with Goldfag there, the more recent version that I'll be using in my old world armies. Compare him to the old Executioner that I've had since I was a teen, and the old Goldfag's Trooper from the mid-1980s. Now, I guess the proportions of the heads are very similar there. This one's slightly shorter than the plastic, but now bring in the beast that is the Dragon Rune Ogre, and that's still a very imposing, monstrous looking ogre, that one. Quick scale comparison with Bretonnian and an Empire handgunner, and I think they work depending on what kind of flavour of ogre you're going for. If you don't like the kind of cartoony look of the Marauder Miniatures or the earlier Citadel stuff, then the Wargames Atlantic ogres are pretty cool, and they're a very good investment as well because you get 9 in a box. Finally, I just wanted to compare it with a plastic ogre bull, if I haven't done that already, so that again you can see size wise it's credible, it works. I'm certainly happy to include those in a Estalia or Empire army. And again, just for sort of scale reference, I'm building some historical armies which I'll be using these ogres with, and that is a plastic miniature there from Warlord Games, which I've featured in previous videos, where I'm looking at using historical models as proxy miniatures for Empire and Bretonnia. I'll just bring in a base here of some Fireforge crossbowmen, and again you can see that ogre really does work with historical miniatures as well as fantasy miniatures. And if cartoony looking ogres are your thing, then I'll just take a quick look at these ogres that I sculpted for the Battleforge many moons ago. These are actually cast in resin, but they were at the time also available in metal. And I was just trying my hand again at some Renaissance style ogres, some Imperial Ogres. I know that 4 of these are available at the moment. I have a feeling the other 2 were never made available. But when Ainsley Castings bought the Battleforge, they did buy the moulds and the rights to all of this. So there's no reason why these can't go up for sale. And that's a female ogre that I sculpted with a dagger behind, or a butcher's knife behind her back, and a rolling pin that she's ready to wield. And then you've got these guys here in the typical kind of Imperial garb. Whoops. And that was me dipping my toe in the water and sculpting some ogres. which, as I said, still available from the Battleforge website. I'll just take one of these, take that one there, move these out of the way, and just do a quick scale comparison against a few ogres that I've got in my collection. So there's one of mine against the Ogre Executioner, and then the same ogre against Dragon Rune Ogre, and it was the Dragon Rune Ogres that were heavily influential in getting me to sculpt miniatures in the first place. I saw these and just thought, yeah, I want to do that. And there we are, a bit bigger than the Games Workshop plastic ogres, and as I said, a bit more sort of cartoony in style. Compare it with a Marauder Ogre. It's probably head and shoulders taller, but if it's your cup of tea, then you can still get them. And finally, with a plastic ogre from Wargames Atlantic, and I think size-wise they fit quite well. There is a difference in the size of the heads, which seems to be a characteristic of Wargames Atlantic, going slightly smaller with the heads. But I think that's a pretty good call if you're looking at using historical miniatures to create fantasy armies, because they work. So that's those. A scale comparison there with a Bretonnian. And I do have some of my ogres that I'm using as unit fillers in my Bretonnian and Empire armies, and I'll be showing that off in due course when I'm actually building and painting the units. But there we are. So one of the things you can do with a Wargames Atlantic ogre is actually give them some sci-fi parts. So although it's the same body as the fantasy ogres, there are some sci-fi weapon hands, weapon arms and heads. And again, I've magnetized these so that I can do different options for my videos. And there's one with smoking a cigar. So I didn't want to have to buy boxes and boxes of these ogres just so I could show all the different variations that were in there. So I've gone for magnetizing these just for the sake of my YouTube videos, really. And here I've got a Games Workshop Warhammer 40k Ogryn. I bought a box of 3, 4, 6 of these, I can't remember, a long time ago, and I used them for kit bashing and all sorts, but I actually built a couple. So we can do a scale comparison here of a Games Workshop Ogryn, Imperial Guard Ogryn model versus a Wargames Atlantic ogre with the sci-fi or modern sort of elements added. There's a little bit of a size difference, but I think if you're playing Necromunda or 40k, you could probably get away with it because you're not pushing movement trays of large units around the battlefield with these figures sort of shoulder to shoulder. There's other little tricks you can use, that if you've got a slightly smaller figure, you can stand it on raised ground, on a bit of rubble, or on top of a boulder, or part of a ruin, and elevate the figure slightly just to compensate for any difference in scale or height. Lots of potential here to kit bash with weapons and so on. Unfortunately, I don't have much left over from these, but again, I magnetized the heads on these to give me a bit of flexibility with some of the 40k videos that I do plan to do in the future. Now, I do have some different examples of these Ogryns. I don't even know if Games Workshop still sell these guys, but I'm keeping hold of these to use in Necromunda. When I get to doing sci-fi stuff, I will be featuring these in future videos. Right, and lastly, I did just want to finish on an abandoned ogre project that I started years ago. This is actually cast in resin, but I've magnetized some of the heads that I've got here. Now, I was hoping to do a more Shrek-like ogre that would work with heads that would also fit the Games Workshop ogre body. So that was the plan at the time. I wanted to be able to create some ogres that had more of a fairy tale look about them than the old Ogre Kingdoms models, which are now of course the Ogre more tribes. I think I did 6 heads in all, and again these are available from the Battleforge website for anyone who wants to do any converting or kit bashing of their ogres. Because as I said, I was trying to be a bit more kind of fairy tale with these, and also create some ogre heads that meant I could use these ogre bodies in with a Dogs of War army or a an Empire or Bretonnian army. So I may still do that. I may still look at kit bashing and changing some of these GW ogres. Of course, these heads fit the GW models quite nicely. So if you were looking to kit bash or convert, and that's what I was planning to use them for, was just really come up with some ogres that looked a little bit more cartoony. Perhaps, and would just work well. Fit with Imperial Guard. So that was a little, as I said, abandoned project, but those heads are available as a pack from the Battleforge website, if anyone fancies. One thing that I did notice was obviously you can't just magnetize or swap the heads out between Games Workshop ogres and Wargames Atlantic ogres, because the Wargames Atlantic heads come with a neck on it and a socket in the shoulders, whereas Games Workshop ogres and Ogryns have the socket in the back of the head and the neck on the torso. And I just want to finish off with a quick lineup of a variety of ogres interspersed with some human miniatures to give you all an idea of scale. So I've kit bashed a Games Workshop Free Company militiaman there, and that's next to an ogre of mine that was painted by a chap called David Marks. He painted some models to feature in my fantasy modelling books. And there we've got a Wargames Atlantic ogre put together as an Estalia ogre with a Warlord Games human in the foreground there. Then we've got the Marauder Imperial Ogres that have been recently reissued, and that's next to the very huge beast of a delightful ogre there from Dragon Rune. I do absolutely love that model, and I'm looking forward to painting it. Now I've just dropped in a Peasant Levy from Wargames Atlantic here. That's a lovely model, very sort of versatile plastic there. We've got a Goldfag's ogre in the background, and an old Ogre Kingdoms plastic ogre, which is now an Ogre Moor tribe. Then I've got the Ghost Archipelago crewman there, and another Wargames Atlantic ogre with an Estalia vibe next to a Bretonnian archer. Hopefully that gives you some idea of how all these different ogres work together. Once again, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash that like button. Please feel free to leave a comment, but keep your comments kind and respectful. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.